A woman is abandoned by her children and betrayed by her husband. Forgotten for years, she eventually does something shocking. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. About 30 years ago, Marissa was a content woman in her early 30s, living a life she had once dreamed of. She was married to David, a charming and successful man, and they had two beautiful children, Emily, who was 8, and Liam, who had just turned 3. Marissa's life was, on the surface, perfect. They lived in a comfortable suburban home, and her days were spent caring for the children while David worked at a well-paying job at a manufacturing firm. They were a picture-perfect family. However, slowly things began to change. David started coming home later and later from work. When Marissa asked him about it, he always assured her that it was because of his responsibilities at the company, telling her he was working extra hours to make sure their future was secure. She trusted him completely. David had always been a reliable husband, a loving father, and had given her no reason to doubt him. Yet, something about his late nights started to feel different, unsettling. One day, a close friend visited Marissa, and over coffee, she gently advised her, "Don't trust anyone completely, Marissa. We all have secrets. Just keep your eyes open." It was a strange comment, but Marissa couldn't shake it. That evening, when David came home even later than usual and gave her his typical excuse about work, Marissa's mind raced with doubt. The nagging feeling of unease grew stronger. The next day, David told Marissa he would be late again due to an important meeting. Unable to ignore her suspicions any longer, she decided to investigate. Since David was a manager at his company, he had a spare key to his office at home, and Marissa knew the security staff well. She could easily get into the building without arousing suspicion. That evening, while David was supposedly working late, Marissa made her way to the office. The security guards recognized her and let her pass without hesitation. As she approached David's office, she could hear his voice inside. She stopped just outside the door and listened. He was on the phone and his tone was relaxed, almost playful. Marissa's heart raced. What she heard next shattered her world. David had put the call on speaker, thinking no one was around to hear him. On the other end of the line, a woman's voice was urging him to make a decision. "David, I can't keep living like this. You need to tell her, or I will." Marissa's hands trembled as the truth dawned on her. David had been unfaithful for years. She couldn't believe it. The man she loved and trusted had been leading a double life. Her instinct was to burst in and confront him, but she held back. Instead, she turned and left the building quietly, tears streaming down her face. When David returned home that night, he kissed her on the cheek, complaining about how exhausting his day had been. Marissa nodded silently, feeling as though she were watching the scene unfold from a distance. She said nothing, wishing him a good night. The next morning, after David noticed that Marissa wasn't beside him in bed, he found her sitting on the couch in the living room, staring out of the window. "Is everything all right?" he asked, concerned. Marissa turned to face him, her expression calm but resolute. "I've uncovered your secret," she said, her voice steady. "You've been hiding something from me, and it's time for you to come clean." David froze. The color drained from his face, and for a moment, he was speechless. He stammered, trying to deny it, but Marissa cut him off. "I heard your conversation last night. There's no point in lying anymore." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream or cry. She simply asked for a divorce. "I'll take care of the children. All I ask is that you continue to support them." David was overwhelmed by a wave of emotions, anger, sadness, and guilt, but he knew there was no escaping the truth any longer. Marissa packed her things and explained the situation to their children in a way that wouldn't turn them against their father. Emily, the older of the two, was devastated. She couldn't understand why her family was falling apart, but she accepted her mother's explanation. Liam, however, was too young to grasp the full extent of what was happening. Marissa moved into a small house with her children, and they began to rebuild their lives. For a year, she tried to maintain some level of communication between David and the kids, but slowly, David began to distance himself. He stopped calling as often, and visits became infrequent. Marissa would try to reach out, but David's responses were short and evasive. Eventually, Marissa decided it was time to leave the city altogether and start fresh. She believed a new environment would be better for her children. But when she shared the news with Emily, her daughter was furious. "I don't want to move," Emily shouted. "I want to stay with Dad and Sophia." Emily had grown attached to her father's new wife, and the thought of leaving her behind felt unbearable. Marissa tried to explain that it wasn't possible for them to stay, but Emily wouldn't budge. She refused to leave her father's side. After weeks of arguments, David proposed a solution. Emily could stay with him and Sophia, while Marissa would take Liam. Marissa hated the idea. She didn't want to be separated from her daughter, but seeing how determined Emily was, she reluctantly agreed. With a heavy heart, Marissa packed up once again, this time leaving Emily behind with David and taking Liam to a new city. For years, Marissa tried to stay in touch with Emily, but her daughter, now a teenager, wanted nothing to do with her. Emily ignored her calls and messages, choosing to align herself with her father and stepmother instead. By the time 8 years had passed, Emily was 17, and she still hadn't reconciled with Marissa. Liam, now 12, missed his sister but had little desire to see his father. He had grown up with Marissa, who worked 2 jobs to make sure they had enough to live on. Despite everything, Marissa remained dedicated to her son. She lived for him, but Liam wasn't the most attentive son. As he grew older, he started to feel drawn to the idea of living with his father and sister. When Liam approached Marissa with the idea of moving in with David, she was heartbroken. For the 3rd time in her life, she felt the pain of being left behind by someone she loved. But ever the selfless mother, she allowed Liam to go. Once again, David, Emily, and Liam were under the same roof. But neither child seemed to care much about their mother. Marissa had always been a loving parent, but her children had drifted away from her. She now found herself alone, struggling to keep up with the bills. Marissa had never finished college, having dropped out when David convinced her that staying home to raise the kids was more important. Without a degree, her job options were limited, and better-paying opportunities were out of reach. But Marissa wasn't the type to give up. One evening, as she sat alone in her small apartment, she wiped away her tears, took a deep breath, and made a promise to herself. "My life will change," she said aloud, her voice filled with determination. "From this moment on, things will get better." 7 years passed. Emily was now 22, and Liam was 19. David, their father, had fallen on hard times. His health had deteriorated, and Sophia had left him for another man, taking a significant portion of his wealth with her. She forced him to pay a high alimony, leaving David financially strained. Unable to afford both his medical treatments and his children's expenses, David decided it was time for Emily and Liam to take care of themselves. He told them they had to leave. The siblings, shocked and uncertain of what to do, tried to reach out to Marissa after all these years, but they couldn't find her. With no other options, they found jobs to support themselves. For the first time in their lives, they had to face the harsh realities of adulthood. Life was not as easy as it had once been. Emily, in particular, began to reflect on how poorly she had treated her mother over the years. One night she turned to Liam and said, "I was so cruel to Mom. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me." Liam, though filled with guilt, couldn't bring himself to search for Marissa. They had no idea where she was, and the years of silence weighed heavily on both of them. Then one morning Emily received an email. It was a job offer from a logistics company. They didn't require any prior experience and offered training. Overjoyed, Emily rushed to tell Liam, who had also received a similar offer for an IT position. The siblings noticed that the company was located in the city where Marissa had moved years ago. They wondered if their mother had something to do with this. Excited by the possibility of reuniting with their mother, they both accepted the job offers. They packed their bags and moved to the city without hesitation. When they arrived at the company, they introduced themselves to Victor, the owner, and his wife Sarah. Both Victor and Sarah were kind, praising Emily and Liam for their potential. But there was no sign of their mother. Over the next 2 years, Emily and Liam worked hard, advancing in the company. Emily earned a degree in business administration, while Liam completed his studies in computer science. Though they hadn't reconnected with Marissa, they couldn't shake the feeling that she had played a part in their journey. Then one day, Victor called them into a private meeting. His tone was serious, but there was a hint of pride in his eyes. "You two have grown so much," he said. "In all my years, I've never seen two individuals show such dedication and honesty." Before Emily or Liam could respond, Victor and Sarah exchanged a glance. Victor continued, "This company doesn't belong to us. It belongs to your mother. Marissa built this business for you, but she wanted you to earn your place here first." Stunned, Emily asked, "Where is she? Why hasn't she reached out to us?" With a heavy heart, Victor showed them a video that had been recorded by Marissa years earlier. In the video, Marissa appeared, her face softened with time. "I am so proud of you both," she said, her voice filled with love. "I've watched you grow and become the people I always knew you could be. I built this company for you, but before I could give it to you, I needed you to understand the value of hard work." She paused, her expression turning somber. "I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye in person. Early onset Alzheimer's has taken its toll, and I knew my time was limited. But I've always been with you, even if from a distance." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened to her mother's message. Marissa continued, "I made many mistakes, but I tried to correct them the best I could. Please forgive your father. He's had a difficult life, and I helped him as much as I could, even if anonymously. Take care of him, and remember that I've always loved you." The video ended, leaving Emily and Liam in tears. Liam sobbed, asking for his mother's forgiveness. They had finally learned the truth. They hadn't been abandoned. Their mother had been watching over them all along, guiding them from afar. Years later, Emily, now 50, stood beside Liam at their mother's grave. David, their father, had grown old and frail, and the three of them had reconciled in the end. As they left the cemetery, an elderly woman, elegant and wealthy, watched them from a distance. She didn't approach, she simply observed, her eyes filled with quiet reflection. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.